My name is Dagmara Bożek-Andryszczak. I'm a specialist working at EDU-ARCTIC project, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the representatives of Arctic and the Antarctic fauna. Why? Because we received from you an information from the teachers that you would like to hear about the overview concerning species Antarctic and the Arctic ones. So I would like to show you some photos, some videos concerning that topic, especially because I work into polar regions, into special places, and had an opportunity to see that animals' life. So I think that would be quite interesting for you. So now the short overview concerning the three terms that very often are encountered by the people interested in polar regions. It's the Arctic, Antarctic, and the Antarctica. Okay, so the Arctic is quite clear because it's the region in the northern hemisphere in the north, typical for the polar bears, the seals as well. I'm mentioning seals because we will discuss a few species of them today. And in the south, the situation is a little bit complicated because we have two definitions. We have the Antarctica, the continent, and the Antarctic. It's the whole region concerning Antarctica, the continent, the islands around the continent, and the southern ocean. So it's typical habitat for penguins, for seals as well, and for whales, like the north, to be honest. So the two places that have been mentioned before, it's King George Island in the Antarctic. It's close to the Antarctic Peninsula. During my presentation, I will use the images of the planet, and you can distinguish to what hemisphere the species are referring to. Okay, I think that would be quite clear and understandable for you. Okay, so on the left we have King George Island in the south, very close to the Antarctic Peninsula, as you can see, and the Spitsbergen that belongs to Svalbard archipelago in the north, in the northern hemisphere. That is the territory that is under the administrative force of Norway. And the Spitsbergen is the biggest island in that archipelago. It's located more or less in that area. And there are two Polish polar stations in that region. On King George Island there is Polish Antarctic Station Arctowski. And on Spitsbergen, in the southern part, we have Hornsund, the fjord, and close to that fjord is located Polish Polar Station Hornsund. Two special places I had an opportunity to work in. And a little bit about the weather conditions in that two areas, because it's not very close to the pole, to the south and to the north poles. So it means that we have a climate typical for the islands. It's more than maritime climate, let's say. Of course, there are circumpolar zones, and the climate is rather cold with very strong winds. But for example, now, maybe not now, because there are data that were current for the 15th of November, but they came from the automatic meteorological station, and there is the link to the website where the data are published. So if you would like to see those data in a real time, just please let me know. I will send it to you after our classes. So now in that area, the summer begins. So it's quite different. And of course, during the summer period is approximately a few degrees above the zero. And during winter, it's not so cold. And the same is true for Spitsbergen. It's about -15 only, -10. But the very important factor in that area are strong winds, very strong winds, especially at Arctowski Station in the area of Antarctic Peninsula. The gusts of wind might reach, for example, 250 kilometers per hour, so it's quite huge speed. And a Svalbard in Hornsund, if you would like to see the data, current data, meteorological ones for the station, there is a Norwegian website where the data are published. Of course, at this Polish station work two meteorologists, so they are working on the current data day by day, hour by hour. And the interesting information is that on the English and Polish versions as well of the website of Polish Polar Station Hornsund, there are live cameras, so we can observe what kind of weather conditions we have in a real time in the Hornsund area. One camera is located on the building or very close to, and the second one is near the flagpole in the front of the station. Okay, so we have our representatives of Arctic and Antarctic fauna. I have told you about the images of the planet that might be very useful for you, in which hemisphere we are, describing those species. We have Adelie penguins, the gentoo penguins, and the three species of penguins might be observed on King George Island. They make nesting colonies on the shores of the King George Island, and only in that period they might be observed on the land, because they are maritime animals that spend almost half of their lives in the sea. The same is more or less true for little auks and common moor, for example. There are fauna representatives of birds habitating the Arctic, and of course it's I can't tell you everything about those species because we are run out of time, but the coloration, because as you can see, black and white coloration is a kind of an adaptation, to the climate conditions, because it is kind of a camouflage. All those species might dive and swim. Yes, the black bellies are for those predators who are in the sea, beneath the birds that are swimming under the sea surface. The sea surface is quite white, like the belly is. And the same is on the land, because those animals are living in the colonies on the shore. So, from the air, for predator birds, the black back on a black surface, dark surface, is less visible than on, for example, green grass. We don't have green grass in polar regions. There are tundra, which are, of course, colorful, but not so typical and similar to those conditions that we have here. Okay, so I have short videos for you. The first one are penguins. You can observe how they are moving, and of course, penguins have knees, because very often students ask me about this. But of course, it's a funny way of moving. And the second representative is common moor. It's the chick. It's very brave, as you can see. And the colony on the cliff, very close to the seawater. Birds from the auks family, typical to the Arctic. And of course, penguins are jealous because they can't fly. And they are in the south, of course. And unfortunately had an unsuccessfully opportunity to meet the predator, the first one, which is Antarctic skua. And unfortunately, it's hunting for penguins. I'm really sorry for my throat today. And the second one is Glaucus gull, the predator bird, very dangerous to the little auks. Little auks colony, very huge one, for example, is located close to the Polish polar station. So unfortunately, we had an opportunity to see the whole process of hunting for the little auks, and the same in the Antarctic, because we had three penguin colonies next to the station. The penguin colony is called Rookery, and unfortunately, Antarctic skua was very unpleasant guest in that colony. And we have pinnipeds. Pinnipeds are typical for both polar regions, but we have true seals and the fur seals. There are some differences between them. And now we have the true seals. We have Weddell seal and elephant seal, typical for the Antarctic, and bearded seal and common seal, typical for the Arctic. And please look at those images, because there are three important differences between true seals and the fur seals. The fur seals will be on the next slide. The first one is the kind of protection against the cold. True seals are fat. A thick layer of fat is a very good insulation against cold. Oh God, sorry. The first one. The second one is the front and hind flippers. They are constructed in a different way, and it is resulted in a different way of moving. You will see it on the two videos. And the third one is the lack of ears. Ears in a true seal's case, of course, they have ear canals. They can hear there without any problems, but there is no visible ears on the head. There are only just small holes that are covered by skin, and it's a little bit different. And here you have Antarctic fur seal, typical for the Antarctic, and look at that animal. The three differences. Kind of insulation, because true seals have thick layer of fat and the fur seals have fur. The ears and the flippers. The fur seal that you can see in the second photo, there is interesting type because it's a leucistic Antarctic fur seal. It means that the leucism is the phenomenon connected with the level of the pigment that is called melatonin. Melatonin is responsible for the color of our hair, for example, eyes, skin. So it means that the fur seal, the leucistic type, has a lower level of the pigmentation. There is less of pigmentation, and that's why the fur color is different, it's more pale. And now we have the true seal in the natural habitat. Look at this, how it is moving. Okay, and we have the Antarctic fur seals. And unfortunately, they are very fast on land. And when we had some encounters with that animals, we were a little bit scared because we really didn't know what's it's going on. Maybe they wanted to play with us or just scare us away. It's hard to say really. But the true seals are rather more friendly than the fur seals. And of course, in the sea, which is the natural habitat for them, they are they are very fast. It's without those differences that has an impact of their behavior on the land. The apex predators. One of the apex predators in the polar region is the polar bear, of course. Yes, they are. It's a female polar bear with a cub, and the photo was taken by my colleague on the glacier. That was a very unusual situation because polar bears are rather don't observed on in inland on the glaciers. We assumed that maybe she was escaping because of the male polar bear that was observed in the area of our station. So she wanted to protect her cub, and that's why she went inland. And we have leopard seal. It's that kind of bad seal that is keen on hunting for penguins, unfortunately. And when we compare the Weddell seal, for example, to leopard seal, we can see that yes, it's more dangerous. The teeth are especially more sharp than the Weddell seal teeth. And unfortunately, leopard seals might be dangerous as well for humans. Of course, it doesn't mean that they are hunting for us. But for example, when we were swimming using our inflatable boats on the bay, very close to the shore where the Arctic station is located, leopard seals observed in that area made an impression that they really wanted to play with us, but we didn't want to. So we heard about the situation when the boats were destroyed by the leopard seals, and it's not so good situation because you really don't know what to do. Maybe it's wild animal, so maybe it is going to attack you or not. So yeah, we were rather confused when we had an encounter with the leopard seals, but fortunately, all those meetings are rather successful. We took some photos and said goodbye to each other and go away, everybody in their own direction. So that was maybe the better option. And polar bears are hunting for seals, so it means that in the polar region in the Arctic, the seals are rather more stressed because of the apex predator, that is the polar bear in that area. They were very... it was not so difficult to frighten them, so the encounters with the true seals on the shore was it was rather a brief moment. We didn't have an opportunity to observe them. And in the Antarctic region, when there are no polar bears, the seals are laying on the beach, laying on the shore, relaxing because they need to have a break during swimming. Of course, they swim a lot, and most of their life they spend in the sea. But it's for them very necessary to go sometimes on the land to take a breath, to sleep for a while or something. We have a film with the polar bear. It's a very huge animal. It's the apex predator. It means that it is in the very top position in the food chain in the Arctic. There are two ones. I guess that there is a female with the cub, but the cub is quite big because the cubs spend their childhood with the mother till 3 years. So that might be the cub. And we have the representatives typical for the Arctic fauna. We have reindeer and we have the polar fox. The reindeer, the interesting information concerning that animal is that the antlers are typical for females and for males. So it's quite different than when we compare it to the other representatives of the animals from the same family. And we have those animals in two types of coloration. That is very dependent of the period of the year. There is a coloration typical for the summer on the left side and typical for winter. The color is changing and also the structure of the fur. It means that during the winter, the hair from the fur are longer and the layers are thicker because the temperatures are getting lower and the fur is very good protection against the cold. And of course, the color is a kind of a camouflage. The white color for the polar foxes and the reindeers. Of course, they might be attacked by polar bears, but it's not so often. Rather, the seals are the main aim of the hunting. But sometimes when there is a lack of food or a polar bear will spot a very weak and, of old animals like reindeer or polar fox, and it might hunt for it as well. And in the end of our presentation, we have the representatives of the maritime fauna. They are typical for both polar regions. There is a humpback whale on the left, and there is the killer whale on the right. The humpback whale, it's the animal from baleen whales. It has a baleen. It's a kind of a teeth, but they are not teeth indeed. It's rather a kind of modification of the skin around the jaw. And thanks to it, that type of whales can filter the food from the sea. And they are very friendly, let's say. Close to the Arctowski station in Admiralty Bay, we observed a lot of those animals. They are so beautiful and they are spectacular, I must admit, because they are not only swimming. For example, they might jumping above the sea surface. For example, when they are feeding themselves, it's also a very big show, let's say, for us, for the viewers that were standing on the shore. So yes, so they are amazing. And the killer whales are a little bit different because they belong to the other family of the animal. They are oceanic dolphin family, and they are toothed whale, let's say. It's different family. It means that they are predator and the apex predator, like the polar bears, but in the natural habitat, which is Arctic or the Antarctic. Those both regions are the natural habitat for it. And it's this hunting, for example, for penguins in the Antarctic. And there is a very interesting hunting strategy used by killer whales because they do it in a group. They wanted to scare the penguins away, disoriented them, and after that, when they know what to do and where to go, they are surrounding the small groups of penguin and pick one which will be hunted, unfortunately. But it is also the interesting adaptation among the representatives of birds in the Arctic, like the little auks, or in the Antarctic, like the penguins, that there is something that is called confusion effect. Confusion effect, it's the behavior typical for group, for colony birds, for example, in that case, that are jumping into the sea or just flying in the very same moment. It means that no one individual will go alone to the sea because he will be or she will be an easy aim for the predators, but they are doing together, and it is called confusion effect. So it is also a kind of an adaptation to the strong climate condition because without it, that would be very easy for the predators to hunt for such kind of prey. Okay, so that was a very, very short overview of some typical representatives of Arctic and Antarctic fauna. If you will have any questions, just please let me know.